evaluation. We quickly ran out. But if you received an evaluation, if you would just take a minute and fill out the back, so then when you leave, all you have to do is complete the front. You may leave it on your seats and we'll pick those up. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us today. I know it's a hot afternoon. It helps that all the air is on in the building and they tell us in the next 24 hours it will start cooling off, so I hope that helps you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joanne Wasnar. I'm the Associate Director with the Women's Center. We have been sponsoring the Her Story series for 9 years, and we do this in collaboration with the Women's Commission. So on behalf of both the Women's Center and the Women's Commission, welcome to today's event. For the students who are in attendance today, we hope to add value and connection to your academic learning experiences. Today's program is to help you connect what is learned in the classroom with an out-of-classroom experience. So we try to connect those, I'm sure you've heard LEAP, Learning Outcomes of Foundations and Skills for Lifelong Learning. So we look at this through the lens of integrated learning and critical thinking. The focus of today's program is to help you identify skills that were used in building a successful personal and career path. And the format of the Her Story is, we hope you will feel free to ask questions. At the end, we open that up to questions. So if you have something along the way you would like to ask Professor Wolverton, please jot those down and save those for the end. I've already asked you to complete the program evaluation. We have a few upcoming programs that I would just like to know. One is Grand Valley is now the site for the state of Michigan for the Ready to Run program, which is campaign training for women. So if you've ever thought you would like to run for public office, either in the near future or coming up in the next couple of years, you could consider this workshop on April 21st. Also, it is Women's History Month, and Maureen's program today is a part of that. We also have Women and the Environment Symposium, which is going to be on March 29th. We have flyers for that. And then on March 31st, Rock Against Rape is open to the college campus. So on to today's program. Our speaker today, as many of you know, is Maureen Wolverton, who is an affiliate faculty member in the Liberal Studies Department. She received her Master's of Art at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, California. She resides with her partner Mark and her 2 children, Emma and Sean, in Granville. Please join me in welcoming Maureen.
Thank you, and thank you today and coming out even though it's really warm in this room. I have to tell you, I did have a dream last night that the air conditioner came back on in this building. I was in Kirkhoff almost all day yesterday and it was sweltering. It's actually a little cooler today. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Joanne. I'm really appreciative for the programming that the Women's Center puts on. I was talking to a colleague the other day and I said, what do women at Steelcase do? You know, where do they go to laugh and cry and hang out and vent? And I'm sure they've found a way to do that, but I feel very lucky that we have the Women's Center here and the programming like the fireside chats and the equality yesterday where women can gather and do all of those things. So thank you very much. Okay. Here's what's going to happen today. I've got about 30 minutes where I'm going to present some information to you, but about 3/4 of the way through that, I'm going to pause and ask you a question. So the question that I'm going to ask you is, what patterns do you see? I'm going to be telling my story, and I think it's really important when we reflect on our stories that we can identify the patterns, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that have taken place over the years. So if we can't see the patterns that we're living, if we can't see the cycles that we're engaging in over and over again, we can't really change them and really own our lives the way we need to. Okay? So keep that in mind. Also, just like Joanne said, I am going to leave some time for questions and answers. So if you do have a piece of paper and you think of a question along the way, please write it down. because oftentimes you may forget by the time we get to the end. Okay? All right. Okay. I have to start with a confession. The confession is this. I ask my students in the Life Journey class to complete this assignment every single semester. So every semester, I ask my students to get up at the end of the course and say who they are, to speak their truth in this world. The confession part, I've never done the assignment myself for this audience. So this is my very first time speaking my truth in the world from this podium within this audience. So I have to start with that confession. So when I tried to think about how to frame this talk, I went to my own assignment handout and I said to myself, well, what is the advice that I give my students when I ask them to present their life journeys? And the project motto is actually, do this for your 80-year-old self. And I take this project motto very seriously, and I'm trying to adhere to it today, because how I interpret that is, I want to be able to tell my story with as much courage, as much honesty as I can muster today. And that's what I mean by the project motto of do this for your 80-year-old self. I want to be able to be 80 years old and look back on today and said that I did all those things. The other advice that I give my students is that it's impossible to tell your entire life journey. They only have 5 to 7 minutes in their presentation. I have 30. But even then, it's really impossible to tell your entire life journey. And for me, when I was crafting this talk, I really reflected hard on what was in and what was left out. And again, I just want to encourage each of you to think about, if you were to tell your life story, what makes the cut and what doesn't and why, and to really reflect on that. So that's one of the things I tried to do today. The other thing I always tell students in the Life Journey class is it's not fair to compare. Oftentimes when I give this assignment, there's this little judge or critic that will pop up. I can almost see it in students' shoulders when they say, but my story's not interesting. What could anyone possibly learn from my story, right? There's nothing special about me. And I can tell you, after doing these projects for 10 years, that everybody has a story. And everybody has something significant to share. Finally, then that kind of leads to my last point of the importance of this assignment for students and for everyone, but the empowerment that you receive when you're able to speak your truth in this world. If you know your truth and you can stand in it and share it with the world, there is nothing that's going to take you out. You might get knocked down from time to time, but you'll always be able to get back up. So I'm kind of leaving this part with a Joseph Campbell quote. The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. So the last thing I'll say about the Life Journey class and assignment is this is the lead-in to the course, and I just want to read this quote and have you think about it before I launch into my own story. It seems the ancient medicine men understood that listening to another's story somehow gives us the strength of example to carry on, as well as showing the aspects of ourselves we can't easily see. For listening to the stories of others, not to their precautions or personal commandments, and I'll be trying not to be giving you any of those, is a kind of water that breaks the fever of our isolation. If we listen closely enough, we are soothed into remembering our common name. All right, so with that, I'm going to share my story with you. I was born in Greenville, Michigan. I was born in Wyandotte, Michigan in October 3rd, 1973. And that's the east side of the state for folks that don't know where that's at. And very quickly, I found myself actually migrating to the west side. My parents did something when I was still in diapers that I could not imagine doing today. They took a huge risk, gambled everything to start a business on the west side of the state. Moved the family, moved us over to this tiny little town called Greenville, Michigan, and risked it all to start a business, not knowing whether or not it would succeed. Luckily for me, luckily for them, it was an incredible success. And I grew up knowing now that I was very privileged. I went to a private Catholic school. We vacationed in Siesta Key, Florida. I had it really, really good materially, okay? And so my life was humming right along, and things were great. And then the biggest shaping factor of my life is my mother's breakdown. My mom went from being the person who had it all together. I watched her go from the person who was like the brains behind my dad's business to utterly descending into madness. And this is by far the single most significant shaping factor of my entire life. So it happened really early on. I was about 13 years old when that happened. And it was a tough time. I almost didn't make it, but I did. Made it through high school, ended up going to doing my undergrad at Michigan State. And by this time, I was really following in my father's footsteps. I wanted to be a successful business person the way that he was. I really felt like he had it all together and was ruling the world, and I was ready to just do that as well. Okay? So I went to Michigan State, and I majored in hotel and restaurant management. My father, by that time, had owned 5 McDonald's restaurants in this area, multi-million-dollar business. And I just decided that if I could major in business, that I would just follow and do the same thing. Well, my junior year in college, my dad came for a visit and then said the fateful words that you never want to hear from anybody in your life, right? And the fateful words are, "You're going to want to sit down for this," right? So I did. I sat down, and my dad proceeded to tell me that he sold the business. So there I am. I'm a junior at Michigan State, studying business, planning, that was my only life plan. I really didn't have a plan B. And the rug had just been pulled out from underneath my feet once again. Okay, so this is really a huge crisis for me. The very next day, I was on the phone to Mackinac Island. And for those of you that picture up there is the Grand Hotel. And I spent the next summer of my life cleaning rooms on Mackinac Island. And I got to tell you, there was a lot more than just room cleaning going on during that summer. There was a lot of soul cleaning going on. And I really needed to reinvent myself and figure out who the heck I was, what I wanted to do with my life. So it was an amazing summer, incredibly transformational summer. And I came back to Michigan State after that summer and decided that I was going to stick with it, that I was going to be a business major. I was really well networked in the major. I had some wonderful mentors. I knew all of the recruiters from all the industry people, and I just felt like this is really what I need to do. So I stuck with it. And it was good. The next summer, I did this management internship at the Norwegian Pavilion in Epcot Center. So that's a picture from Walt Disney World, Orlando. There were 12 of us selected from around the country to do this prestigious management internship. I got to hang out with Norwegians all summer. It was super fun. And manage a restaurant and a bakery and some other things. And it was a great summer. And so I felt pretty good about the path I was on. When I graduated from Michigan State, I really could go work anywhere I wanted. I knew all the recruiters. And I picked Starbucks. And I went to Chicago. And I was in my 20s running those really busy Starbucks downtown Chicago, like having a great time. It was just a really good time. Then I had the wonderful opportunity to open the very first Starbucks here in Michigan. And so I was the opening store manager of Somerset Mall's first Starbucks and grew the market significantly, opened the Ohio market, was really rocking through Starbucks, was really just opening up. That was the time when they were just expanding like crazy, okay? And then I burned out. I burned out, and I quit because I was exhausted. And I realized that this was not really what I was going to be doing the rest of my life. And then I had to figure out again, what in the heck am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I did something really weird. I was in downtown Royal Oak, and I walked by this little locally owned jewelry store, and I saw this ring in the front window. And it's this ring I have on right here. It's a big one. It was a Roulet quartz ring. It was really expensive, and I just quit my job. But you know what? I bought it. And I bought it because there was something about a place in me that was drawn to this that I knew I needed to listen to. And somehow, this was symbolized by this ring. Okay? where that led me to was where Joanne was telling you I went to grad school at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And this is a small institute outside of Santa Barbara, California. It's where the Joseph Campbell Library is housed, for those of you that know his work. And I went there to study myth. This was my time now, and I decided that I wanted to study, this was about me, and what was I drawn to. I went out there for the interview to get into grad school, and Kathleen Jinks sat me down and said, "Why do you want to go in this program?" And I said, "Where's the magnet? You have to have had buried a magnet around here somewhere, because this isn't a choice for me. You don't understand. I am completely drawn to this place and to this program. And it's just never felt more right in my life." And so I went there and I studied myth, and from an interdisciplinary perspective, it's the only place in the country that really has this kind of myth program. And it was a wonderful experience. We were reading myths as psychology. And so one of the really important thinkers in my intellectual development is Carl Jung. And he really, I think, there's just no one better at understanding the importance of symbol and metaphor and image, and how humans use these images and metaphors and symbols to make meaning. And that's what I was interested in. I wanted to know about how we make meaning in our lives. And myths are the way that people have done that. This leads to my Grand Valley story. Yay. When I finished the myth program, I don't even know how it came to me, but I saw a call for proposals for a festival at Grand Valley. This was before there was a Women in Gender Studies department or even a program. At that time, there was a women's festival, and I submitted a proposal and was placed on a panel with Peggy Vandenberg from philosophy, and Peggy was the first faculty member that I met here at Grand Valley. And we got to talking during the panel and after the panel discussion, and she said, Judy Whips is always looking for good people to teach the life journey class, and I think you would be really good. And I agreed, and Judy agreed. And I started teaching for the liberal studies. At that time, it was a program. Now it's a department in fall of 2001. Okay. And this is really the beginning of my Grand Valley story. And the Grand Valley story goes like this. This place for me has been amazing in that it has provided growth opportunities in ways I never imagined were possible for me. I was the coordinator of the Liberal Education Dialogues for a few years. I was around at the start of the Community Reading Project. I was so excited. We just had a speaker last night, Isabel Wilkerson, and I just love participating with this program. Through Grand Valley, I was able to develop the skills to lead strategic planning sessions, which is another thing I love to do. Went to amazing conferences, planned, again, lots of speakers, and I'm so excited that I was able to see, the Brooks College of Interdisciplinary Studies emerge. So all of these things, there's tremendous growth opportunities for me through this place that I'm really grateful for. Another thing I'm grateful for is the West Michigan Women's Studies Council. And again, Judy Whips introduced me to this consortium of women who were bringing in speakers from all over the world. And I was a part of the planning of this. This was really important for me because as an undergrad, I had zero background in feminist philosophy. Feminism in my household growing up was like a swear word. So, this was really significant for me to be able to fill in the gaps and figure out how women see the world in a way that I was just never exposed to. So this was just an amazing opportunity. So people like Barbara Ehrenreich, I was able to meet, Eve Ensler, Wangari Maathai. We brought about 2 speakers in every year for about 9 years. So it was an incredible learning experience for me. I can't do this presentation without also saying that this time period I became a mom and how significant that is. You could do a whole presentation on motherhood and the meaning of motherhood, but I don't have that kind of time. I just want to say this. I just want to say that these 2 kids are my teachers, and they are the most intense and hardest teachers I've ever had, I'm really glad they don't give letter grades too, because I don't know. I don't know how that would come out, but I have learned about myself, I've learned about my strengths, I've learned a lot more about my weaknesses as a result of these two up here. So I have to include them in this presentation. Okay, now we're at the point that I told you before. I'm going to pause for a second. I call this moment my full plate moment. Where I have this, wonderful career going through Grand Valley, amazing volunteer work I'm doing with the West Michigan Women's Studies Council, 2 beautiful children, and that's kind of what the plate looks like, okay? But what I want to ask you now is, did you see any patterns? As I told this story, this is when I stopped and looked back on the presentation and asked the question, all right, where's the pattern? What's emerging here? Okay. What's the cycle? You see any patterns? What do you see? Yeah, go ahead, Jen. Okay, so you're like, okay, you're already kind of jumping ahead, which is, you always do that, it's good. What's next, right? And you're like, oh, something bad's going to happen. Oh, gosh, I can feel it, all right? So you see this pattern of like, things are going great, and then, right? Good, good. What else? Other patterns? See anything else? Yeah. You know me well. I don't know about this.
Okay.
No, go ahead. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
But I'm only going to operate on the things that I saw from the presentation, so I won't reveal anything. But I see 2 kind of key turning points that were significant. One was the ring, and one was the mention of Pacifica being a magnet. So I see almost this emergence of an intuition, or not necessarily knowing what the next step was, but trusting that you're heading in a particular direction and acting on that.
Good.
And at the same time, the other pattern I see is just this incredible array of skill sets being developed.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Leadership and public speaking and organizing, and that was drawing on your education.
Good. Good. I like that. I like that you're hitting on one of those big things, is that shift to letting yourself be led by where you're supposed to go, even though you might not know where that's headed. Yeah, good. Other ideas? Other patterns? Yeah, go ahead. Can you speak up really loud, too? Discovering who you are, yeah. And that's an unfolding process of discovering your own identity. You know, the famous Parker Palmer, we wear many faces, until we find our face. Right. All right, good. I'm going to tell you the pattern that I see that struck me with some force to the point where I had to stop and regroup when I was putting this thing together. So here's how I'm framing it, and I think all of you are right. Here's what I see. I see these incredible periods between outward expansion and then reversed by these incredible swings back towards inward reflection. And throughout my entire life, I see these swings as being really big and kind of scary. When I looked at them, I was like, wow. And let me show you what that looks like to me. When I lost my mom to the descent into madness, I didn't talk about this a lot, but that was my initiation into the internal. I went down and I went deep, and it was ugly. But I was initiated into that process of death and rebirth, and that was huge for me. When my dad sold the business, I went to an island, for crying out loud. Okay, look at the symbolism there, right? To go and reflect on what that meant and kind of recreate and reimagine who I was. And it's the same thing when I had the Starbucks burnout. I went out to California, for crying out loud. I went really far away, and Pacifica very much is like an island, and that this very supportive community that I found. So when I reached this full plate moment in my life, when I had the career and the kids and all this volunteer work that I loved, and I loved all of it, but it was, again, you've got like French fries falling off the edge of the plate. I again found myself really craving that sort of island moment, and I'm so happy that I kind of found a place to have that where I didn't have to go really far away. So what happened next in my life, and this is the most current period, and that makes it the most difficult to reflect on, because I'm really close to it right now. So it's kind of hard to situate it, harder than the other things in my life. But I was introduced to C. Michael Smith through his academic work on Jung and shamanism. And remember, when I was at Pacifica, I was studying Jung's work, and found Michael on Facebook, and he said, hey, check out my website. And I found this book and read this book and thought, oh my goodness, this is where I need to go. Again, this is really resonating with me. And then I find out that he has this Center for Shamanic Studies right in Dowagiac, Michigan, where they have these retreats and things. So I started going and found a place to go inward again for me. Okay? Again, separate presentation on unpacking what is shamanism. We could be here for a week, but I don't want to do that to you. But what you need to know about what shamanism is for just right now, what is a shaman? Depending on the culture that they're coming from, they're considered visionaries, doctors of the soul, a bridge to spirit. Again, depending on their own specialties, they perform a variety of functions. And traditionally, this was really religious belief systems that create institutions. This is really before that. The shamans were the spiritual leaders of the culture and societies. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. Studying shamanism has taken me all over the world. I went to France last year, went to a festival of shamans, met people from all over the world, every continent. And it was really amazing. This summer I'm going to Peru. I'm going to the Amazonian Shamanism Conference in Peru in July. I'm going to meet people from, again, South America. I'm really excited to do that. I'm also teaching this Jungian shamanism course on campus. It has just been the most beautiful course that I've ever taught. It's just amazing. And I'm able to weave shamanistic ideas into almost everything I do, including I did this TED Talk on soul sustainability, which really brought in the notion of interconnectedness and the interdependence of all things, which is a very shamanic notion. So I've been able to, here's my connecting the dots moment. Right now, it seems like I'm able to bring that deep need I have for inner reflection and also channel that into what I'm bringing out into the world. So for me right now, instead of feeling like I'm taking these huge swings between my inner and outer, I feel like there's more congruence in my life in that way. And that has been incredibly significant to me. The metaphor that works best for this, and I use this in my TED Talk as well, is Parker Palmer's Mobius strip. And if you think about this shape, this form on the screen, if you run your finger along the Mobius strip, you go from being on the inside of the strip to suddenly and seamlessly being on the outside of the strip, and then you go back inside. And there's a congruence that's held in this image for me that I hold close to me as I'm continuing to walk and unfold on my path. So here's what I learned while I was putting this together. The first thing I learned, and I learned this young, is that it's really important that I have to listen to my inner guides, that I can't let the outside world tell me what I'm supposed to be. That was really important, and I can see how I hoped I've learned that. The other thing is about walking a heart path, and what I learned by doing this presentation, what I hope I've learned by walking this way, is you have to honor that heart path, your intuitive sense, where to go next, even though you don't know what's beyond the bend. It's really important. The other thing I'm going to talk about in a second is trusting in solid mentors. This has been incredibly important throughout my life. At every stage of the game, I was so lucky to have people who could see me, and this is, by the way, this is my definition of a mentor. Somebody who can see you and see you reaching your fullest potential. This is a gift. And then somebody who can support you along the way, no matter what. That's a mentor. Okay? And I have been very lucky to have many mentors, solid mentors like that in my life. Okay? The other piece that can be difficult is making time to reflect. I feel so honored and so lucky to be able to do this presentation, to be given this assignment, to be forced to take time to really reflect on who I am. Okay. And then the last two things are probably the most important. I'm continuing to learn how to develop a congruence between my inner and outer lives. I think that's just going to be a constant for me. And I'm continuing to find ways to find and speak my truth in this world. Because again, I believe that that is such an important thing for all of us to be able to do. Okay. I'm going to end on one thing, and then I'll take questions. I want to show you something left in my bag. I forgot to grab my book out. So I got the coolest Christmas present this year ever. One of my strong mentors and friends, her name is Eileen Noman, but her pen name is Lindsay McKenna. She's a best-selling author. And she sent me this book for my Christmas present, and I was like, oh, good, she sent me her latest book. I can read it. That's so great. And then I open it up, and she says, you know, see the dedication. I'm like, oh. Okay. So I flipped the dedication, and it says, to Susan Hamilton of High Country Raptors, it's a friend of ours in Arizona, to Marty Reinstra, Tricia Speed, Patricia Comfort, Monica Amaryllis, Sunday Larson, Naomi Rose, and Maureen Wolverton. And these are all like our tight circle of women friends. All strong, intelligent, and compassionate women. Our world needs positive, healthy role models for women. It takes a state of mind, a confidence in yourself to be treated as an equal in today's society around this world. I'm privileged to be a part of your lives as you are a part of mine. My wish is that someday soon there will be equality for all women in our world. And I was so honored to receive that as a gift, and I feel like, you know, that is my wish as well. Okay. So, thank you for listening. Thank you. And now I will take any question you have. This is an incredibly personal presentation. No question is off the board. I'm happy to entertain any question that you have. Alex.
How old was your mom when she had her breakdown?
Oh, that's a good question. She was in her 40s. Very unusual time period for that to happen. Well, at the time they diagnosed her as manic depressive. You know, now we would call that bipolar, but actually she was schizophrenic as well. So it's kind of a blend. She doesn't fit into one of the nice diagnosis boxes. But I can tell you that during her periods of madness, she was nowhere near this world. And I was right there with her, and it was scary. Yeah.
How old were you when she had the breakdown?
I was 13. I was a teenager. Yeah. That was a really tough time because you're in the process of, you know, you still really care what other people think of you. And I was in this very small town of Greenville, Michigan, and people at that time didn't talk about mental illness. And my mom was behaving really erratically in town, and people thought she was drunk. People thought she was on drugs. They didn't know. And so it was really challenging. And the other thing that was incredibly challenging, and I'm sure some of you have had this experience, when something like this happens, it's so interesting to see what friends come closer and what friends run away, right? When you have big tragedies like that happen in your life, you really can tell who your friends are. And I learned that through my mom and my mom's circle of friends, you know? Yeah, good question, yeah. Yeah. I know. It's like, what do you leave in? What do you leave out? You know, I am married, yes. And, you know, actually, I was going to say in fall 2001, that was also the year that I got married. I was married the Saturday after 9/11. How about that? So you make the reservation for all these people, and then no one wants to get on a plane, you know? We got on a plane and went on our honeymoon regardless, and we, like, had the run of the place because no one went, but we did. So, yeah, Nick. During the Starbucks burnout? Yeah. You know, the final straw for me, sometimes, you all as young people need to know this, sometimes when you're young and you're really good at your job, you get taken advantage of. And I kind of felt like I was taken advantage of. I was really good at my job. I had a lot of energy. And they would send me into stores to clean up other people's messes. And that gets old real quick. You know, like I can build a staff of people to do anything, and I love to do that, and that's fun. And but then you have to go to Birmingham. They have 7 employees. How do you run a store when you have 7 employees because everyone quit on one day? You know? Like that's the kind of thing I would get thrown into. You know, and there's only so many times you can do that before you're like, no, this is not. And plus, I knew that really wasn't why I wasn't put on this earth. There was always that little, like, no, this really isn't it. There's something else you're supposed to be doing here, you know. So once I was like able to let go of again, this was kind of the legacy of living out my dad's dream. Once I was able to let go of that, the way opened for my path. You know, that was really an important moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think your experience in Catholic school sort of influenced your drive or your being really drawn to studying shamanism? Was that difficult to deal with your family?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I had a really great education, and but I found myself really early on challenging some pretty basic core principles of Catholicism, and boy, that was not taken well by the authority figures. You know, I'm going to tell you a story. This is really this was like my done for me. This doesn't have to be your truth. This is my truth. I was in CCD, you know, and I was in this, and the leader of the discussion, then the father came in. It was like we were in 5th grade or something. We were really young. The father comes in, and one of the smartest kids in the class raises his hand and says, I have this friend named Jeff. And Jeff is a really good friend of mine, and he's a really good person, but he's not Catholic. Is he going to hell? And the father said, yes. And at that moment, I went, nope. This is not for me. This is not what I believe. And I was young, but for me, that wasn't right. And there was something inside me that said, sorry, this isn't me. And I bailed at that point. Does that answer your question? Again, that's my truth. It doesn't have to be yours. Other questions? Susan.
When you were asking about patterns.
Patterns.
One of the things that I noticed, so I was like Chris, and I was going to say things, but one of the things I noticed is the point at which life seemed perfect, there was the shift. So something might have led to that shift. So your dad selling the restaurants, right? Why? And the reason I ask is I think a lot of the women I interact with, everything's,
It's okay. It's okay.
everything seems perfect, but it's not.
Yeah, so Susan's saying the pattern she noticed in my life is when things seem to be going well, that's when and things fell apart.
It's an issue of doubt. There's surface.
Right. My belief, and again, this is just my belief, is that, boy, if you are not on your path, the universe will come and make sure you are. And so you can either, make choices on your own to get to closer to your path, or the universe will come and wallop you and force you to do that. And clearly for me, I really honestly, I look back at my mom and the situation now, and I'm so thankful, because I would have been such a brat if that never would have happened to me. I would have grown up and thought that everything was about material things, and I was brat. I was a brat before that happened, and now I'm not. At least I don't think I am. But for me, again, my life, and I know this path, and I can frame it in a different way, but the shamanic archetype is death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth. And I think all of us on some level experience that, and that you have to let go of the old in order for the new to come in. And sometimes that is really hard. And sometimes we want to maintain that persona of things are going fine, and we're holding on to it as hard as we can. And sometimes there's only a certain amount of time that you can do that before. Again, the universe says, no. So I had the universe come in and straighten me out a few times, and I'm sure it won't be the last. Yeah. Good question. We have time for a couple more questions. Yeah.
How did you take the good and the bad in your life?
Yeah.
Not like preaching. How
Yeah.
do you take that and become a leader?
Yeah. Her question is, how did you take the bad things in your life and turn them into gold, as what Joseph Campbell would say? How do you find the lesson in the suffering? I think that is the most important life lesson that there is. And I got to be honest, I don't know how I did it, But I know that I have really strong, what I call guides, you know, other people might call them a guardian angel or what have you. But that moment when, I mean, I almost didn't make it through my mom. That was, but I woke, I literally, I mean, I was in drugs, I was, you name it. But I literally woke up one day and said, this is not who I am. And I just shifted my perspective. And it took me a lot longer to then integrate all of the lessons. But there was something like, whether you call it grace, or, you know, whatever you call it, there was something that, that higher calling that shifted me. And I don't know why some people make it and some people don't. I really don't. I think that is an incredible mystery, you know? In the Life Journey class, we read Ishmael Bea's book. How that guy made it through his story, I don't know. Jeanette Wells, The Glass Castle, how did she make it through and be successful? I don't know. But I know that reading their stories and listening to these stories somehow gives us a sense of that, you know? That's a great question. It's a great question. Yeah. Good. One more, then we'll leave this hot room.
Could you just talk a little bit about, how did you find your mentors? Was it just built on friendship? Was it deliberate?
Gosh, you know, when I look at this presentation and my big mentors along the way, I mean, the first one that really stands out professionally is Dr. Woods, and he was a professor at Michigan State. He taught this awesome course at Michigan State called Human Organizational Behavior Management. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? It was the most amazing course in the world. We had about 300 students in the class, and he would do a lecture, and then we would break out. And I had 30 students, and other TAs had 30 students, and we would get together and plan how to teach this course. So I was teaching this 300-level course at Michigan State when I was a junior. It was awesome. You know, he trusted us, and he believed in us, and it was beautiful, you know. And so I met him I literally remember the day when I asked him, like, can I be a TA for this class? Because I really like it. And I was so excited that he said, yeah.
So you took a chance.
Yeah, I had to ask. Oh, you have to ask. You have to ask. You have to ask. Sometimes. My second, you know, some recent mentors, Michael from Crow's Nest, literally found me on Facebook. I mean, come on, how does that happen, right? You know, that's how that happened. And then one of my latest strong mentors, Eileen, she is his teacher. So I studied with him, and I'm studying with her. So kind of like, but I really do believe that whole, like, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear thing. At least it's happened in my life that my mentors have all come on the scene right at the right time. I was at full plate moment there, and I didn't know what was going to happen next, and poof, friend request, see Michael Smith. I'm like, who's this? I don't know who this is. You know, I send a message back, do I know you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, go look at my website. And I did, and I went, oh my gosh, this is it, you know? Sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's about asking. And sometimes they just show up at the right moment, right? It's just great. It's good stuff. Nick? Can you say that a little bit louder, Nick? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. My practices are, need to do better daily practice, right? But I have a really great spiritual community, and I go there as much as I can, and I meditate, you know, and I spend as much time out in nature as I can. I need to spend more time out in nature. There's something about that place that you don't even have to do much, you know, but I have grounding techniques that have really helped me stay grounded through tough times, that are meditations, and other spiritual practices through Crow's Nest, shamanic practices that we do. We do journey work, which is like guided meditation stuff, and there's sacred dance. There's all kinds of ways that you can connect with yourself and connect, in my opinion, with the divine, you know. Yeah. Authors? You know, just within the framework of this, I think a book that everyone should read, you know, of course you should read The Alchemist if you haven't read The Alchemist. I love the 4 agreements for immediate change in your life. If you feel like your life is kind of negative, how many people, think about this, if you feel like you're kind of surrounded by crabby people, or if like, you know, if you go out to your Facebook page and everyone's just, you know, complaining, read the 4 agreements, and you might find that if you apply those things, all the crabby people kind of leave. And you're surrounded by people that are positive, and that is awesome. So I recommend everyone read and apply. You can't just read it, you have to actually do it, you know. But it's very simple. The 4 agreements, I think The Alchemist is awesome, you know. As far as, I love Joseph Campbell's work. It's what brought me into myth, and it brought me into learning how to see the patterns in your life. Because if you don't identify the patterns, you might just be blindly living by other people's agreements and patterns. And that could be generating some pain and suffering for you. Or it could be a great pattern, or it could be a neutral pattern. But if you don't know about it, that's the issue, right? You know? So, I don't know. Is that good? Any other questions? I want to thank you guys for being like the best audience ever. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just a reminder, if you received an evaluation, if you would now complete the